Hey friend, this is the Traveling Wellnesspreneur podcast, and I'm your host, Allie Temple. I travel full-time running my dream wellness biz from the tropics, and I want to share with you how you can create a lifestyle of freedom and purpose too. Stay tuned for inspiring and fun conversations that will empower you to take action towards your dream lifestyle of travel and freedom. Let's get into it. Welcome back, friend, to the Traveling Wellnesspreneur podcast. Now, this week I am sharing the first of a new little series that I have decided to call my Living in Mexico series. I'm going to be talking about my time in Playa del Carmen and sharing with you some of the pros, some of the cons, in my opinion, about spending time as an entrepreneur living and working in Playa del Carmen, Mexico. So for those who don't know, I've been spending about the last 5 or 6 months in Mexico for the most part. And so this is the first of a few episodes. I'll also do an episode on Mexico City, and I'll do one on Puerto Vallarta. I've spent time in most of these places in the past as well, so I often get asked questions about what it's like to be in these different places and if I recommend them. And so that's why I want to break this down for you in one episode today, starting with Playa del Carmen. Now, before we get into that, I want to share with you something really fun that is coming up next month in March. It's the Liberate Your Life Virtual Summit. This is going to be a free online 3-day event in March that I am teaming up with a bunch of amazing travel experts, and we are going to be talking all things travel. This summit is going to be for those of you who are entrepreneurs and you're interested or you're yearning to start traveling and bring your business on the road, or maybe you're looking to move abroad and get out of your comfort zone, move to a new country and bring your business with you there. But to do these things in a way that is sustainable, that is realistic, that is really setting you up for success and wellness, because as you probably know, I've been traveling full-time for more than 3 years now, and oh man, I've learned a lot along the way. I get so many of you asking how to get started on that journey and how to keep it sustainable without burning out. So that's what this summit is going to be all about. Keep an eye out on this podcast or on my Instagram at Allie Temple Yoga. I'll be sharing more info on that very soon, and I can't wait to see you there. All right, let's talk now about Playa del Carmen, Mexico. I've got a little bit of a list here that I'll share with you around my pros and my cons of the time that I recently spent in Playa del Carmen. I was there for a few months, and it was a combination of solo travel, and I also had some friends come to visit, and I also had some travel with my husband. So it was an interesting perspective for me to get to see and feel what it was like on my own, with friends and with my husband. You know, all of those experiences are a little bit different. So let's dive into the pros, the things that stick out for me about living and working in this area. One thing that's always at the top of my list, if I have it, is the walkability. And I know I've talked about that before on the podcast, but I love being able to walk places pretty comfortably. And this is definitely a very walkable area of Mexico. And I felt totally safe. Like I said, I was in Playa del Carmen by myself for a while, for about 6 weeks, while my hubby was working in California. And I felt much safer walking around solo in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, than I did, for example, when I went to Vegas right afterwards while my hubby was at a conference there. Now, I won't get into the details with that. That's another story for another day. But I know that Mexico sometimes can have this reputation for not being safe. And I can only speak to my experience and that specific area when I talk about this. But I felt super safe as a solo female traveler. Now, if you are looking for comfortability, is that a word? Comfortability? You want to be comfortable. You want some Western comforts. There are a ton of really nice apartments that are relatively affordable. Yes, the prices have gone up over the last couple of years. I was there in 2021. Things have changed. I don't want that to come across as a reason not to go somewhere. It really just, I think that is an invitation for you to look at your budget and what makes sense. Because from what I'm hearing of so many places around the world, and probably wherever you are at this time as well, prices are going up. Inflation is a real thing. So don't let that stop you from visiting a place. Just be mindful and intentional with how you spend your money when you get there and if it makes sense for you to be there. And I did find that accommodations were, for what you're getting, they're still fairly reasonable. So just coming back to the walkability piece and the comfort piece, really, like I had my Pilates studio, a yoga studio, a gym, and they were all within a short walk from my apartment. So I love that ease in being able to stay well and take care of yourself, because that is a big component to me for living a well-rounded and sustainable lifestyle on the road and in foreign countries. Now, a lot of the apartments in the area of Playa del Carmen, a lot of the short-term rentals also have rooftop pools, which I am totally there for. It's one of my favorite lunch break activities to hang out at the rooftop pool, rest my eyes, and recharge a little bit away from screens. Another thing that I love about Playa del Carmen, there are plenty of day trips or weekend trips that you can take within a couple of hour drive or bus ride that are really beautiful. And although I don't love Tulum myself for a longer term accommodation for reasons that I won't get into on this one, but it's beautiful in Tulum and there are a lot of wonderful things that you could do there. So for me to take a weekend and go to Tulum, which I did get to do over my birthday, it was beautiful and so much fun. Tulum is just about an hour drive away from Playa del Carmen, so it's super accessible. And there are plenty of other day trips that you can do as well. You can take a day trip to one of the hundreds of cenotes in the area. And if you've never been to a cenote, I believe they are only in the Yucatan, in that area in Mexico. These are like underwater sinkholes that you can snorkel in, you can swim in. Usually the water is so crystal clear, and there are caves and crystals and like all of these amazing things. So that's a really great way to get some nature in when you are staying in that area. But also, as far as nature goes, the beaches are beautiful too. The water is nice, the sand is soft, and generally the weather is really beautiful. Now, one more thing that I love about Playa del Carmen, a lot of people do speak English there. So although I'm working on my Spanish and it has come a long way, it is just a little bit more comfortable when you can understand what other people are saying to you. And then my final pro for staying in Playa del Carmen is just coming back to the accommodations. There is a lot of reliable internet, and as a traveling entrepreneur, you definitely have to keep that in mind. If you have live calls, if you are uploading a lot, you want to find somewhere with reliable internet. And from my experience, especially a lot of these beach towns, it can sometimes be hard to find somewhere with a solid Wi-Fi connection. Now that I have spoken all of the praises for Playa del Carmen, I also want to share some of the challenges that I faced, or some of the things that I find to be less than desirable about spending time in Playa del Carmen. Now, in no way am I complaining. I just want to share both sides to my experience so that you can make an informed decision if this place is on your radar or if you are considering heading to Playa del Carmen in the future. Now, the first thing I want to note here is that there really isn't that much for local culture. This was my experience anyway, and I'll speak more into that as this list goes. I didn't find too many options or opportunities to actually integrate into authentic local communities. So if that is something that's really important to you and at the top of your list, this might not be the destination for you. Having said that, really this area is catering for the most part to tourism, and so there's tons of vacation vibes, especially certain areas, certain neighborhoods. Playa del Carmen is not a huge area, it's quite small, but you can feel a different vibe in different neighborhoods. And if you're in like the center, you're gonna end up kind of in the thick of it, and you know, the whole Mexican vacation, especially certain areas by the beach. And once you get into those areas, you'll also notice that the food prices are inflated due to tourism. There are a lot of those kind of tourist traps for local excursions and things like that. The main beaches, although they're beautiful, they also can get really crowded because there are so many people on vacation in those areas. Now, one more thing about the beaches, you can find some just stunning, beautiful beaches, but also be aware that sometimes there is a ton of seaweed that's been pulled up onto the beach. And now I think this is a seasonal thing. And I was there from September to December on this last run, and it was fine. There was no seaweed, but you might want to look into that for your trip if you're thinking of going, because it can really, especially if you want some beach time, this seaweed is no joke, and it doesn't smell the best either. A few other notes I have for you on this list. Now, I did mention the cenotes and the beaches, but other than that, there's not really a ton of nature. There aren't really parks or other like grassy areas of any kind that I can really think of. Now, there aren't really much for co-working spots, co-working cafes, or even really other like comfortable cafes that are nice to work from. So if that's your thing, keep that in mind. If you are more of a homebody and like to work in your accommodation, then it's all good. You can probably find something fairly comfortable for that. Although there's not much for co-working spaces, I know that there are definitely expats there, but I just didn't really get a very strong sense of that expat community vibe. So, you know, compared to other places like Bali, of course, and I just didn't feel like there were a lot of other expats working remotely there. Now, something to keep in mind is there is a rainy season in this part of Mexico, and I was there briefly in August, and the weather was not good. So just always look into this if you're going with the expectation to have a lot of beach days or pool days. Look into the weather patterns and plan your time there accordingly, because when I was there in August, it rained it rained every day. So when you're in a beach town, it's not always an ideal occurrence. Okay, I've got one more for this list. Now, I felt that the general vibe in Playa del Carmen, there's not really a huge wellness culture there like some of the other places I've traveled to. You can find your wellness tribe and your wellness places. Like I said, I had Pilates and yoga, and there are some juice places and a few nice vegan restaurants, things like that. But I would say the general energy of Playa del Carmen is a little bit more focused on the vacation vibes, kind of even the party vibe. So that is the feeling. And of course, it depends where you're spending your time, where your accommodations are. But generally speaking, that was how I felt with the overall vibe. So to recap, to break it down, my general thoughts around my time in Playa del Carmen, I found it was comfortable. I felt really safe. It was relatively affordable and just an easy way. I would recommend it for those who might be starting out and looking for those kinds of things with their travel and remote work life, I would go back. And at the same time, after spending a few months there, I was definitely getting a bit tired of the touristy vibes. So there you have it. Those are my thoughts on Playa del Carmen. Reach out to me on Instagram. Let me know what you thought, if you've stayed in Playa del Carmen before. And I'd love to hear your thoughts also in the Traveling Wellnesspreneurs Facebook group. I will link to the Facebook group in the show notes. Don't forget, we've got the Liberate Your Life Virtual Summit coming up in March. Stay tuned for more info there. And there's no episode next week because I will be on my Sayulita retreat. So stay tuned after that. I'm going to do a couple more episodes for this Living in Mexico series. I'll be talking next about Mexico City and spilling the tea on my experience there. I've got lots to share about Mexico City, and I've also got a wild story about lost luggage that I'll share with you and a few of the lessons that I learned from that experience. So that's it for now. Until next time, travel well. That's it for now. Thanks so much for joining me, and until next time, let's stay connected. Follow me on Instagram at Ali Temple Yoga. Join us in the Traveling Wellnesspreneurs Facebook group. And if you enjoyed this episode, please take a minute to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. See you next time.